Are 10,000 hours truly enough for mastery? Or is there a smarter path to peak performance? Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 05, Episode 15, as we delve into Chapter 15, The Myth of 10,000 Hours, of Daniel Goleman's insightful book, Focus. You know, for years, that 10,000-hour rule has been everywhere. Like this gospel for success, just put in the time, master anything. Simple.
It sounds simple, doesn't it? So appealing. But, the fascinating thing is the psychologist whose work really sparked that whole idea, Anders Ericsson, he actually says it's only half true.
Only half true. So what's the other half?
Well, he uses the example of a golfer, right? If you're a duffer, just hacking away, making the same mistakes for 10,000 hours, you don't magically become Tiger Woods.
No, probably not.
You will still be a duffer, maybe an older duffer, but still a duffer. It really hammers home that mechanical repetition, just going through the motions without adjusting. That won't cut it.
Okay, so it's not just doing it, it's how you do it.
Exactly. The real path, Goleman argues, based on Ericsson, is smart practice. That means you're constantly adjusting what you do, trying to get closer to your goal. You're tweaking the system, pushing yourself, even if that means making more mistakes at first.
Right, pushing beyond your comfort zone.
That's where the real learning happens, and that's what we're really digging into today.
That distinction feels crucial, and there's a great story in the book that really illustrates this smart practice idea. Susan Butcher, the 4-time Iditarod winner.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic example.
For anyone listening who doesn't know, the Iditarod is just unbelievably grueling. It's this sled dog race over 1,100 miles across Arctic ice.
Yeah, more than a week out there. Just you, your dogs, and the wilderness.
Yeah.
An incredible test.
And Butcher approached it differently, didn't she?
Totally. The traditional way was like run 12 hours, rest 12 hours, long stretches. But Butcher, she innovated. She broke it down into shorter chunks, maybe 4 to 6 hours of running, then rest, then run again, all through the day and night.
That sounds exhausting for her personally.
Yeah.
Less consolidated sleep, right?
Huge risk for her. While her dogs rested, she was often busy preparing for the next leg, getting maybe an hour or two of sleep herself sometimes. But she'd practiced this system, she believed in it, and well, she ended up dominating the race multiple times.
And it wasn't just the schedule, was it? Her whole approach to her dogs was different.
Oh, completely. They were her absolute #1 priority. She treated them like, elite athletes year-round. Top vets, top nutrition, specific training.
She really got that rest is as important as running, like a human marathoner.
Precisely, which apparently was kind of dismissed at first. The book mentions it was seen as a man's cowboy-type sport, and her careful, almost scientific approach was different.
But it worked. It changed the race.
It really did. Her husband, David Monson, talked about the sheer level of preparation. He compared it to planning an Everest expedition. Think about it. 1,000+ miles, temperature swinging maybe 100 degrees, from 40 above to 60 below 0 Fahrenheit, blizzards. You're carrying everything. Food, medicine, repair kits for you and 14 dogs for potentially 2 weeks.
And making critical decisions on almost no sleep.
Life and death decisions, constantly. While the dogs rested, she was checking paws, fixing sled runners, melting snow for water, feeding them, then trying to grab that hour or two of sleep herself.
Monson's quote really hits home. Keeping your attention up during a highly exhausting and stressful time means you have to be methodical and well-practiced so you make the right decisions under duress.
Exactly. It wasn't just toughness. It was incredibly focused, methodical practice paying off under extreme pressure. Another winner, Jo Runyon, pointed straight to her self-discipline and that exceptional focus. Her dogs were just better prepared because her method was smarter.
It's amazing how her real-world experience lines up so perfectly with what Ericsson later called deliberate practice.
It really does. It's the perfect illustration. It's not just the hours. It's what you do with those hours.
So let's unpack that a bit more. What exactly is deliberate practice, according to Ericsson?
Okay, so the core idea is that it's purposeful, guided training, not just noodling around. It usually involves a few key things. 1, an expert coach, or like Butcher, being that expert coach for her dogs, constantly observing and adjusting.
Right, someone who knows what good looks like.
Exactly. 2, it needs well-designed training, usually over months or years, not just random effort. 3, it demands your full concentration. You can't be texting while you're doing deliberate practice.
Makes sense.
And maybe the most crucial part, a feedback loop. You need a way to recognize your errors and correct them. Think of dancers using mirrors or athletes having coaches yelling adjustments from the sidelines.
Ah, the immediate correction.
Yes. Ericsson's research is pretty clear. If you practice without that kind of feedback, you just don't reach the top levels. You plateau.
But The hours pile up, but they're not enough on their own. Goleman says how experts in any domain pay attention while practicing makes a crucial difference, like those violinists Erickson studied.
That's the famous study. Yeah, the top violinists. They didn't just play tunes for 10,000 hours. They practiced with intense, full concentration on improving a particular aspect that a master teacher had pointed out. A specific bowing technique, a tricky passage.
Targeted effort.
Very targeted. And there's a brain reason for this, tied to neuroplasticity.
Okay, lay the neuroscience on us.
Basically, for your brain to rewire itself, to build and strengthen the neural circuits for a skill, you have to be paying attention. If your mind is wandering while you practice, if you're daydreaming or watching TV,
Your brain's not getting the memo.
pretty much, the relevant circuits aren't getting strengthened. Daydreaming literally defeats the purpose of the practice, neurologically speaking. Full attention is what boosts processing speed, strengthens those connections, builds the networks.
This explains that difference between amateurs and experts Goleman talks about. Most of us learn something, like driving or skiing.
Yeah, maybe after about 50 hours you
Oh,
get, yeah, okay. Good enough. Your skills become kind of automatic bottom-up, as Goleman puts it. You can do it without really thinking.
And then we just coast.
Exactly. We stop putting in that focused effort. And so even if we keep doing the activity for years, we don't really get much better. Our improvement becomes negligible.
But the experts, they fight that urge to go on autopilot.
They do. They keep paying attention top down. They consciously focus. They counteract that brain impulse to just let routines run automatically. They're actively zeroing in on the bits they haven't perfected yet, fixing what's not working, refining their mental models.
They're always pushing the edge, like Erickson said, seeking out training where the goal is just beyond their current level.
Right, always stretching. The more they invest that full concentration, the more refined they become. But there's a limit to that intensity, too.
Ah, yeah, focus fatigue. It's like a muscle.
It really is.
Yeah.
Erickson found that top performers, pianists, athletes, whoever, they tend to limit that really hard focused practice, maybe to about 4 hours a day.
Only 4 hours. That seems low for world-class performers.
4 hours of that kind of intense, deliberate practice. They build rest and recovery right into their schedule because you can't maintain that peak concentration indefinitely. Pushing too hard for too long means your focus drops off and the practice becomes less effective. Optimal practice needs optimal concentration.
Okay, so deliberate practice hones skills. But what about attention itself? Can we, expand our basic mental capacity? You mentioned the Dalai Lama's interpreter, Thupten Jinpa.
Yeah.
That story is incredible.
Isn't it? Jinpa listening while the Dalai Lama speaks, sometimes for 15 minutes straight.
15 minutes, I'd forget the first sentence by the time he finished.
Me too. Jinpa just jots maybe an occasional quick note, then delivers this perfect flowing translation. It seems superhuman.
Is he just wired differently? Or is it training?
It's absolutely training.
Good.
He credits his time as a young monk in a Tibetan monastery. Intense memorization training from a really young age.
What kind of training?
Memorizing these incredibly long classical Tibetan texts. Sometimes 30 pages of root text plus hundreds of pages of commentary. They'd learn it by sound, reciting in the dark, adding lines bit by bit until they had whole texts down cold.
Wow, that's intense.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it shows what the brain can do. Anders Ericsson actually taught American college students a similar skill. Through about 400 hours of focused practice, they learned to recall sequences of up to 102 random digits.
102 digits. Okay, so it's possible. How does that even work?
A key technique is chunking. It's a form of smart practice for memory. Jinpa mentioned that while he listens, he gets the gist, knows the texts being referenced, and makes shorthand notes for key points, essentially chunking the information.
So breaking big things down into meaningful, smaller units.
Exactly. Herbert Simon, the Nobel laureate, talked about this. He said experts have something like 50,000 chunks of familiar information in their domain. For a doctor, chunks might be patterns of symptoms.
Like building a mental index.
That's a great way to put it. Memory as an index. You're not necessarily expanding your raw short-term memory, but you're getting incredibly efficient at organizing and retrieving vast amounts of information using that memory.
Which brings us back to attention. Goleman calls attention a mental muscle.
Yeah, I like that analogy. And the workout for that muscle, it's surprisingly simple.
What is it?
The mental equivalent of lifting a weight is just noticing when your mind has wandered off and then gently bringing it back to your target, whatever that is.
That sounds a lot like meditation.
It is the core of basic mindfulness meditation from a cognitive science view. Meditation is attention training. You focus on your breath or a mantra, your mind wanders. That's natural.
Happens every time.
Right. The instruction is always notice it wandered, gently let go of the distraction, bring your focus back and sustain it, then repeat over and over.
And scientists have actually watched this happen in the brain.
They have. Researchers at Emory University used fMRI. They saw this 4-step cycle. Mind wanders. You become aware it wandered. You shift attention back. You sustain attention.
And doing that cycle repeatedly strengthens the muscle.
Exactly. More reps, stronger muscle. Experienced meditators actually show changes in their brains. They get better and faster at noticing the wandering and disengaging from it. Their thoughts become less sticky, easier to let go of.
So the brain connections literally change.
Yeah, increased connectivity between the mind-wandering parts and the parts that disengage attention. It really shows that the specifics of the practice matter. Concentrating like that builds a foundational strength you can then apply elsewhere.
Okay, strong attention is key. But there's another factor Goleman brings in, positivity. And he starts with a great Larry David story.
Oh, the Yankees game. Classic Larry.
Right, he's at Yankee Stadium, gets shown on the Jumbotron, 50,000 people cheer wildly for him. Amazing moment.
You'd think he'd be thrilled.
But then, leaving the parking lot, one guy yells, "Larry, you suck!" And that's what he obsesses about all night, the 50,000 cheers. Gone.
Ha. It perfectly illustrates our negativity bias, doesn't it? Bad stuff just grabs our attention much more strongly. Negativity tends to narrow our focus right down to the problem, what's upsetting us.
Which, as Goleman points out, can be a recipe for depression if that's all you focus on.
Whereas positive emotions do the opposite. Research by Barbara Fredrickson shows positivity actually widens our attention span. We take more in. We shift from a narrow me focus to a broader, warmer we perspective.
And this shows up in the brain, too.
Definitely. Richard Davidson's work at Wisconsin found that feeling upbeat and energized lights up the brain's left prefrontal area. That area is also involved in motivation, in driving us towards goals, helping us anticipate the good feeling of achieving something.
So positivity isn't just feeling nice, it's actively motivating.
It literally fuels the drive. It activates the brain's reward circuitry, the nucleus accumbens, rich in dopamine, and releases the brain's natural opiates. This combo helps us persist and makes the effort feel more rewarding.
And we can consciously tap into this.
To some extent, yes. Our executive control centers can trigger this positive circuit, helping us sustain good feelings and keep going even when things get tough. And that obviously pays off hugely for performance, better focus, more flexible thinking, more perseverance.
This leads into the work of Richard Boyatzis at Case Western Reserve on coaching. He asked this really interesting question.
Yeah, the dream question. If everything worked out perfectly in your life, what would you be doing in 10 years?
It forces you to think positively about possibilities.
And the brain responds. Boyatzis found that talking about positive goals and dreams literally activates brain circuits associated with openness, reward, good feelings, happy memories. It opens you up.
As opposed to focusing on the problems.
Right. If you focus on the negatives, the tough schedule, the difficulties, your fears that activates brain areas linked to anxiety, sadness, conflict, it physiologically closes you down.
So Boyatzis says you need both. Negative focus to survive, but a positive one to thrive.
Exactly. You need to address problems, but you thrive when you're oriented towards possibility. This ties into the Losada ratio idea, too.
Ah, yeah, the positivity ratio. Something like 3 good feelings for every bad one?
Roughly, yeah. Barbara Fredrickson, building on Marcel Losada's work, found that high-performing teams and flourishing individuals tend to have a ratio of at least 2.9 positive to 1 negative interaction or feeling. Too much positivity might make people complacent, but too little, and they just don't flourish.
And Boyatzis actually uses this dreams-first approach in coaching.
He does, with real results. He gives examples from his MBA students. One engineer, very task-focused, realized he needed better empathy. His learning plan involved coaching his son's soccer team, specifically focusing on how the players felt.
Using a real-life situation to practice.
Yeah, low-risk practice. Another executive wanted to be more attuned and gentle, so she volunteered as a high school tutor. These aren't just classroom exercises. They're about building new habits, new neural pathways in daily life.
And these changes actually stick.
Apparently so. Boyatzis tracked people for up to 7 years later and found the improvements held. It suggests that consciously cultivating that positive, goal-oriented mindset really can reshape how we operate long-term.
Okay, so wrapping this all up.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway for you listening right now? It really feels like we've come full circle from that simple 10,000-hour idea.
We have. Mastery clearly isn't just about clocking hours. It's fundamentally about the quality and focus of those hours. It's about being deliberate.
And positive.
And positive, yes. The core elements of smart practice seem to be this powerful mix. Finding some joy or purpose in it, using smart tactics like deliberate practice and feedback, and bringing your full focus to the task.
Those elements build that basic attention muscle, which you need for any kind of deeper focus or learning.
Absolutely. They're the foundation.
So maybe a final thought for everyone. As you go through your rake, think about where your own attention muscle could use a workout. Is it about sharpening a specific skill with more deliberate focus, maybe working on your memory like Jempa? Or perhaps it's simpler just trying to consciously accentuate the positive in your day-to-day.
How can you make your own practice, whatever it is, more joyful, more strategic, more focused?
Something to think about.